Hey Watchers, as some of you might know, we are huge Stephen King fans, and we are excited to continue our journey of covering movies based on or written by him. Today's film is the coke-fueled directorial debut by the master of horror, and consequently, the last film he ever directed. So with that, buckle your seatbelts and brace for impact because it's time for 1986's cosmic crash derby classic, Maximum Overdrive. Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the show where we discuss classic, cult, and modern classic movies.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Josh Baruto, and we review movies that are at least 10 years old. Fair warning, we're big on spoilers here, straight from the get-go.
We rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, the level of impact and success it had when it was released. Number 2, how relevant is it today? Number 3, our own personal enjoyment of this movie. And number 4, is it a midnight watch?
What is a midnight watch? It's a film which completely captures your attention, drawing you in. No matter what time or what part you start watching the movie, you have to finish it.
Okay, so today, let's see, we are getting into Maximum Overdrive. This movie is pretty fun to talk about, actually. Okay, so I was actually conflicted about reviewing this movie so early because it is the one and only movie directed by Stephen King. And since, Josh, you and me both really like Stephen King, I don't know, it's just it's kind of a sweet spot, if you know, so I didn't want to spoil it too soon by us doing the episode too soon, but I think actually starting season 2 with this is pretty good. So,
yeah,
I agree. Let's jump into just a little bit of information here. It was released in 1986, directed by Stephen King, written by Stephen King. The score is by AC/DC, and the budget was $10 million, and the box office was $7,400,000. And let's see, it was based off of a short story entitled Trucks. And they actually remade this movie in 1998, also entitled Trucks, which I had not heard of that before I started researching this film. Have you ever heard of the remake?
No. Well, I don't know. I feel like I'd seen it around, but I didn't really pay attention to it until, like you said, researching this film. Oh,
gotcha. Let's see. So this movie stars Emilio Estevez, Laura Harrington. Well, it says Stephen King, but he's really only just got a cameo in this. Holter Graham, right. Pat Hingle, Yeardley Smith, John Short, Ellen McElduff, and Frankie Faison. And actually, no, I'm not going to talk about that yet, so I'm going to skip that part. Anyways, so Josh, where did you see this movie for the first time?
Well, that would be just before this podcast, actually.
Wait, are you serious?
I had always put it off. Okay, well, like I've said before on the show, I didn't always love horror movies. I've loved Stephen King. I should say I've loved his books a lot longer than I loved his movies. Yeah. And so I'm kind of relatively late coming to the loving the horror movie genre party. Probably been really only in the last 10 years. Before then, there were certain, specific films that I enjoyed, but otherwise I would not have called myself a horror fan.
Wow.
Let alone or especially a classic horror fan. I'm definitely a classic one. There's still some newer ones that they just don't do it for me. But in general, I love them more. Anyways, it really it was kind of a put off to me, are what I thought these movies were to his books. Like, I thought they were just terrible, other than like Shawshank or Green Mile or Stand By Me, his more serious ones.
Right.
So this one in particular, and I'd always heard how bad it was, and I knew he was like super hopped up on coke like 100% of the time he was making this movie. So I just kind of was like, I'm not going to waste my time.
Right.
So yeah. I watched it recently.
Wow, that's amazing. I would say you're a bigger Stephen King fan than I am, and so that just really shocks me because I saw this movie like literally 10, 11 years ago, something like that. Man, it's probably longer than that, and I thought it was horrible. At the time, I was like, it needs to be super true to the story, which I did read the short story on this. Have you read the short story?
Just on Wikipedia. Well, that's not true. I know I've read it before because it was in his first collection, right?
I don't remember.
Or whatever you want to call it.
I don't remember which book it was in. I just remember it must have been one of his earlier ones because I did read this.
Right. I'm sure I did too. That's the thing. Because when I was looking at it on Wikipedia, just trying to refresh myself on the story, I was like, okay, I know I've read this.
I think it's the same book that has Lawnmower Man in it as well. And maybe...
I think you're right. Yeah, it's on the Night Shift. And I know I've read that one, but that's, like you said, being a big fan, and I I really got into... You got me into him. I remember you gave me Needful Things and Thinner. And I just... Man, I tore the covers off those things. I read them so fast. Oh, and then I was just absolutely hooked. And I read like everything I could get, from the library or, finding paperback books at work, whatever I could do. I was, buying them, whatever. I was read as much as I could. So I know I ripped through a bunch of his short story collections. And unfortunately, when you're reading that fast, you don't always retain everything, but yeah, I'm sure I've read it.
Oh, that's awesome. So were you saying Needful Things and Thinner, those were your first Stephen King books that you ever read?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. I think for me it was From a Buick 8, and then after that I think I read The Gunslinger, which was a bad choice. I feel like...
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I did enjoy the Dark Tower series. I finally read the entire series last year, actually. But... Yeah, no, it's definitely different King flavor versus From a Buick 8 is kind of more the staple Stephen King that you expect. So
sure, and it's newer too. I think you wrote that in the 90s.
Yeah, I think our late 90s or something. I think that's why I jumped in on it, because it was his newer one. So I was like, oh, this is going to be good. Which is funny. This actually, older Stephen King books, they're written different than, of course, newer Stephen King books. He's the same author, but you feel he's definitely gotten better. Like he's evolved more. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that all of his...
Right. I mean, that is controversial, because there are people that hate his new stuff and think only his good stuff is the early stuff. But he just evolved as a writer, and I love all of it, man. I feel like each segment of his life was interesting, because you can definitely tell his confidence or his addictions or whatever's kind of going on in his life was definitely coming out in the books a little bit.
Oh yeah,
or a lot.
No, I agree. I think that's the thing that people maybe that might not like the new stuff as much, is because it's not as crazy as the stuff that was in like the 80s, and because obviously he had some serious drug addictions at that time, which brings us back to this movie. And as you pointed out in the beginning of this, that, yeah, Stephen King was potentially coked out of his mind the entire time he was making this movie. And he's very open about that. A little bit controversial, though, because there is a rumor that George Romero actually ghost directed most of this film, because George Romero was on set a lot of the time, and Stephen King was asking him how to do different things. And then apparently when he went to Stephen King went to go get help for his cocaine addiction. And so it's not proven, but George Romero was there on set a lot of the times, because they were buddies at that time.
Right.
I thought that was...
Yeah, I knew all those like classic horror guys, for the most part, they seem like they were kind of a cool little group of people.
I know, man. I would have loved to have been able to sit down and talk to George Romero. The older I get, the more I appreciate his films.
Dude, for real. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to... I mean, I guess it's just my growth as a cinephile or whatever you want to call it, but...
Yeah.
I used to hate his stuff. I used to thought it was so terrible, and now I'm just, I really get what he was doing, and really appreciate just the groundbreaking work he did.
Yeah. No, he had a lot of really smartly written movies, which I'm kind of surprised we need to get on that. We need to review one of his films pretty soon.
I know.
So it looks like, what's funny? We reviewed Silver Bullet, which came out the year before this, actually. And so Stephen King was kind of on his movies were pretty hot at the time. And so in 1986, Maximum Overdrive came out, which he considers to be one of the worst movie based off of his work. I think he's more critical just because he directed it, because I think there's a lot of other Stephen King movies that are way worse than this. But
absolutely, yeah, I think you are your own worst critic, and I think that's 100% what happened here with him, just owning the whole project.
Right, which I'm kind of disappointed that he disowned it. I'm like, dude, it's a great, terrible movie. Like, it is. It's such a B movie. It's actually on. I was reading into it, and apparently it's labeled as a comedy, a horror comedy. And I didn't ever think of it as that. I just thought it was a bad horror movie. But there is some pretty funny stuff in this movie. But Yeah, so the same year, though, Stand By Me came out, which kind of redeemed him story-wise, since that movie, a lot of people like that movie. So.
Oh, yeah. That was amazing. Then, again, that's one that I loved way before I loved any of his horror movies or, movies based off his work, horror-wise.
Well, it's funny. He's known for his horror movies, but he is just a great author. Like, his stuff that's not horror, a lot of people don't even know it's him because they enjoy it so much. So
yeah, that is why I love him. To me, he is an absolute master storyteller.
Yeah.
Who cares about what the scary thing is or the frightening thing is in his stories? It could be a demon-possessed toaster. It doesn't matter because his characters are so engaging, and the landscape and everything he paints about it is so amazing and just draws you in. It doesn't matter what is coming after them or what they have to try to overcome.
And with it being a horror landscape, then your audience is expecting anything to go down. Like, they're open for whatever. It's not like, oh, this got a little too intense, I'm not used to this. It's like, no, if you're gonna go see a horror movie, you know what you're in for. And so I think that kind of gives you like open borders to really dive into like the human soul and just different things that people deal with. Like, Mike Flanagan is a director who's directed several of Stephen King's newer things. He is really, really good at working about grief. And so with that, like, I just feel like sometimes you can't get into certain human emotions as deep as you can in the horror genre, which is one reason why I really enjoy it, is to just kind of let you really get out and explore the dark side of the human psyche, but then also too, like, just the deep side of the sometimes emotions and things that we feel, and it's not exactly easy to talk about. But in the horror genre, you can really dive into that and just really get into it. Like, for example, I know we haven't talked about the Haunting of Hill House, but you and me were both obsessed with that show, and that was kind of cathartic for me with our mom passing away a few years ago, just on how they deal with grief. And that's a horror show, and that actually like helped me to process some grief on that. And so I think Stephen King, though, is just, he is, like you said, excellent at tapping into human emotion and writing characters really well. So it doesn't matter exactly what's going on in the story. You're connected to the characters. Yeah. And so
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we get away too far, we should probably get that synopsis.
Yeah. And,
let's do it.
It's a doozy, folks. It's a doozy. Here we go.
Really?
Thank you, Wikipedia.
Like, nothing happens in this movie. Okay, go ahead.
Just raw, unfettered chaos. Here we go. As the Earth crosses the tail of a comet, previously inanimate machines suddenly spring to life. An ATM insults a customer, who happens to be Stephen King, and a drawbridge, or a bascule bridge, rises during heavy traffic, causing all vehicles upon the bridge to fall into the river or collide. Chaos sets in as machines of all kinds begin attacking humans. At the Dixie Boy truck stop just outside Wilmington, North Carolina, employee Duncan Keller is blinded after a gas dispenser sprays diesel in his eyes. Waitress Wanda June is injured by an electric knife, and arcade machines in the back room electrocute a customer. The cook and paroled ex-convict Bill Robinson begins to suspect something is wrong. Meanwhile, at a Little League game, a vending machine kills the coach of a team by firing canned soda point blank at him. A driverless cement roller flattens one of the fleeing children, but Deke, who is Duncan's son, manages to escape on his bike. A newlywed couple, Connie and Kurt, stop at a gas station, where a brown tow truck tries to kill Kurt, but he and Connie escape in their car. Deke rides through his town as humans and even pets are brutally killed by lawnmowers, chainsaws, electric hairdryers, pocket radios, RC cars, and even an ice cream truck. At the Dixie Boy, a black Western Star 4800, sporting a giant green goblin mask on its grill, runs over Bible salesman Camp Lohman after a red garbage truck kills Duncan. Later, several big rig trucks encircle the truck stop. Meanwhile, Connie and Kurt are pursued by a truck, but they make it crash off the side of the road as it explodes. They arrive at the truck stop and try to pass between the trucks, but their car is hit and overturns. Bill and Brett Graham, a pretty hitchhiker, rush to help them, but the trucks attack them. The owner, Bubba Hendershot, uses M72 Law rockets he had stored in a bunker hidden under the diner to destroy many of the trucks. Deke makes it to the truck stop later that evening and tries to enter via the sewers, but is obstructed by the wire mesh covering the opening. That night, the survivors hear Lohman screaming in a ditch, and Bill and Kurt sneak out to help him by climbing through the sewers. Deke finds Lohman and believes he is dead, but he suddenly jumps up and attacks Deke. Bill and Kurt rescue Deke, and a truck chases them back into the pipe. The next morning, a Caterpillar D7G bulldozer and an M274 mule drive to the truck stop. The former pushes Hendershot's Cadillac inside. The angered owner uses the rocket launcher to blow up the bulldozer. The mule fires its post-mounted M60 machine gun into the building, killing several people, including Hendershot and Wanda June. The mule then demands, via sending Morse code signals through its horn that Deke ciphers, that the humans pump the truck's diesel for them in exchange for their lives. The survivors soon realize they have become enslaved by their own machines. Bill suggests they escape to a local island just off the coast on which no motorized vehicles are permitted. While the crew is resting, Bill theorizes that the comet is actually a broom operated by interstellar aliens that are using our machines to destroy humanity, so the aliens can repopulate the Earth. During a fueling operation, Bill sneaks a grenade onto the mule vehicle, destroying it, then leads the party out of the diner via a sewer hatch to the main road, just as the trucks demolish the entire truck stop. The survivors are pursued to the docks by the Green Goblin truck, which manages to kill trucker Brad when he falls behind. Bill destroys the truck with a direct hit from an M72 Law rocket shot. The survivors then sail off to safety. A title card epilogue explains that 2 days later, a UFO was destroyed by a Soviet, in quotations, weather satellite, conveniently equipped with a Class 4 nuclear weapons and laser cannon. 6 days later, the Earth passes out of the comet's tail, and the survivors are still alive.
So
Boy, that was one of the worst write-ups from Wikipedia. Sorry, everyone.
I actually, and that was actually a better explanation of the plot than the movie itself. We could
that's saying something.
We could start off right off the bat right now. Like, this movie is bonkers. It is all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
The AC/DC, definitely, it was Stephen King's personal soundtrack, I think, at the time. But there's literally no horror music in it except for like the psycho sound of like rain. Besides that, it's just all AC/DC music, which really kills the mood for a horror feeling for the movie.
Right. But as far as like a thrill ride of just craziness, it's awesome. Yeah. It is absolutely one of the coolest things about this movie.
Yeah. No, this movie is straight up. This is a B movie trying to be an A movie. I don't even know if it was trying to be an A movie because there's so much like, okay, so a lot of the different dialogue in this movie is straight up King. It definitely sounds like dialogue from his books, and but some of it
especially his early books.
Right, but some of it doesn't transfer to movies very well, if that makes any sense. And so, like, some of it's crazy sounding. Like, there's so many little one-liners in this movie where you're like, they just put like 3 words together as an insult for somebody, and so it's pretty funny though. But
I think some of that, to be fair, because I mean, Emilio Estevez, he's a good actor.
Oh yeah,
or I should say he's not a bad actor. I'll put it that way.
No, I wouldn't.
Whatever people think about it, and so I think a big part of that is, even though the dialogue might have been okay, but if King was the one doing the directing, that might have just been part of it right there, where they just didn't have good directing as far as how to deliver the line.
Oh yeah,
the way he had it in his head, or the way that it would have come out perfect for him on paper.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I don't fault the actors at all. Like, there's good acting and bad acting in this movie, but like you said, no, I think I think it was very clearly like there's several like goofy parts in it, and so it just. Yeah. Also, too, though, like halfway through the movie, they can't figure out what to do with the plot. They're like, obviously, they need to escape eventually, but they don't talk about escaping. They don't talk about anything. And then, like, when the trucks are finally like, "Hey, we need you guys to refill us," then they're like, "Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that." And then there's that montage of them working hard all day, filling up trucks, and then just like literally a little bit later, like the trucks go right back into trying to kill them all. So it's just that didn't really make sense. So I guess, and I do love though how Emilio Estevez and he's like all sweaty and he's about barely staying awake because he's just so dehydrated, and he's like, I think it was UFOs doing like a broom, and I was just like, okay, they have to, like, you know, he's delirious, and then at the end of the movie they're like, by the way, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Exactly what happened.
So I thought it was too funny. There is a lot of parts in this movie that, oh man, this is another great film to watch with friends and like to just have it on.
100%. Yeah.
There's just so many little things about this movie that is just actually a lot of fun. I definitely think I think this is one of the better bad Stephen King movies in that this is actually enjoyable. It's fun to watch.
I agree.
Because it's bad.
I agree. And I think too, and I guess I see this from maybe his point of view. If you went into this expecting a great quality Stephen King movie, as in, you know, a legit piece of film that's respected by critics and whatnot, of course you're going to be disappointed. But I knew about this movie, so I knew what to expect. I can't even say I had the bar lowered. I wanted a hot dumpster fire. So that's, you know, and I can't even say it was a dumpster fire because there was a lot of it. It's a great B movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually the car crashes and stuff in this are pretty fun, which again, cocaine, you know, like that's just
right. Well, I got to say too, I feel like the bridge scene where the cars are just piling up and falling everywhere. Yeah. That does, just as I was thinking as you were talking about Romero really helping him out, to me that does have a strong Romero kind of vibe when you look at his older you know, zombie movies or early zombie movies. Yes. I was watching The Crazies the other day, and a lot of those just crashes and just kind of the way that the driving is done and everything, it kind of gave me that kind of a vibe too.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you know what's funny? I rewound the bridge scene several times because there's a couple stunts in that scene. I was like, is that a dummy or is that a real person that goes through the windshield?
I know.
And I think it's a real person. But
I think so too, because I know exactly the scene you're talking about.
Yeah, I was like, that's a pretty brutal scene. Like, actually, I'm impressed on the stunt work on that scene. It's just, right. I was like, oh wow, that's actually really intense. And unfortunately though, that does set, if you've never seen this movie before, it's right at the beginning of the film, and it sets the bar higher of like, oh, this is actually kind of creepy because there's no music, and then when there is music, it's like more upbeat. So they could have actually kind of gone with a Birds type of feeling where there's no music in the Birds, and Alfred Hitchcock was just building suspense by us not knowing what's happening, and just like the camera cuts in that. But they didn't. I feel like this was actually versus Queen. I think actually really helped the Flash Gordon movie with this one.
Oh right.
I think AC/DC,
as far as a rock and roll soundtrack.
Yeah, and I think AC/DC really hindered actually some of it. Because you definitely need some other type of music in it besides just the rock and roll music.
Right. But if you know Stephen King, he is 100% a rock and roll guy. And so this is perfect. This is the movie I would say, at least in that time in his life, I think it seems like, if I could say, this is the movie he would want to make. I mean, it's all the craziness. It's big explosions. It's, you know, he's one of his very favorite bands, you know, wrote the entire soundtrack for him.
Yeah. And
it's that's him, which, I mean, if you read his books, a lot of times there's a ton of music being sung, or the lyrics are kind of, you know, peppered throughout the entire book. So he's very much, you can tell he's got rock and roll just going through his head all the time. I got to say, it has maybe at this point my favorite King cameo.
Oh yeah.
When he's at the ATM and it starts not responding to him, and he's all like, sugar buns, this machine called me an asshole.
Yeah.
Yes.
That as well is definitely, I think, the best so far. I agree, it's the best King cameo for sure. Oh, what I was going to say, this movie was marketed, though, to be like a really strong horror movie. Like, if you watch the trailer, Stephen King's just talking to the audience saying like, hey, I'm Stephen King. This is my first directorial movie. And I thought to myself, if you want a Stephen King movie or a Stephen King story told right, then you got to do it yourself. And he says that like 2 times in the trailer, and the trailer's cut to look really scary, and you don't really know what's going on in the trailer. So you're like, I want to check that out. And then you watch the movie, And it's just freaking bonkersville from like the very beginning, like the whole like right before the Stephen King cameo and the camera's going in, you see like on the screen on the building where it says like the name of the building, all of a sudden it changes and it's like F you and it's just like little things like that is funny. But this movie doesn't follow its own rules though, because there's so many cars that don't become sentient. There's so many little electronic devices that don't do anything. And
I was gonna say for sure.
It's funny. But you know what's funny too though? This movie was edited hardcore, like censored. There was a lot more gore that was going to be like almost every single kill. There's an extended gore shot, and it was dramatically edited down because the MPAA thought that it was too violent, which is kind of funny because I will say some of the gore scenes are surprising yet again because there's no music leading up to like the kill stuff. Like for example, when the steamroller comes out of nowhere, it starts rolling over the kids,
and it kills kids. Yeah, that's kind of a I don't know. It's still sort of a taboo thing. I mean, there's
two taboos in it. There's pets that get killed in this movie. Like, apparently that's off screen, but like you get the idea though. Like they're just going on a murderous rampage, which is pretty crazy. Okay.
Right, but yeah, killing pets and kids, man, that's dark stuff.
Yeah, even in Independence Day, like they didn't kill kids, and the dog makes it makes it to safety, even though thousands of humans die. Who cares about that?
Right, but especially like innocent kids, because obviously kids can be, the scary thing in a horror movie, but.
Right.
This actual like innocent kid bystander, and they show it get rolled over.
Wow. And so that part actually, the dummy that they rolled over, the way that the head exploded, it just like it exploded outward and like was really graphic. And Stephen King loved it, and that was one of the scenes he fought for a lot to keep in the movie. But eventually they had to cut that out because of it being a kid instead of an adult.
Right.
So that's pretty hilarious. We got to talk about real quick somebody that went on to have a pretty amazing career actually, and that was I think he only has one line in this movie, but it's Giancarlo Esposito, who is just blowing up right now. He's been around forever, but now he was in Breaking Bad, that was his big breakout, and then now he's the main villain in The Mandalorian. And yeah, I just was watching him where did you recognize him in the movie?
No, I'm trying to think now.
Dude, he was the guy inside the game room.
Oh my gosh.
He's so young, and I was like, wait a minute, is that what's his name? And then like he was like, your mama, and then like backing up, stealing all this stuff, and then gets electrocuted.
Dude, I can't believe I missed that. Yeah, that dude is huge right now. Yeah. He is probably the biggest villain in film and TV today.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's in I looked over what he's been in. He's been in stuff like all over the place. He was in Mandalorian. He was in Miami Vice. He was in Do the Right Thing. He was in, of course, Sesame Street, and then the classic Chupacabra Terra, which I have not seen, but that sounds amazing. But
he's in The Boys. He's like one of the main bad guys in The Boys.
Yeah, Breaking Bad was his breakout hit. Like that was the movie,
for sure,
the one where you were just like, oh my gosh, who is this actor?
Fring. Yeah.
And it was just amazing seeing him in such a young role. He's barely in the movie, but I was just like, oh my gosh, that's the villain from The Mandalorian. So
it is always cool when you see. Not to judge his earlier work, but I love seeing an actor really come into their own when they're older, which typically back in the day, it's like those are when, actors would start getting lesser roles and kind of get put out to pasture, and then you got, a guy like him who's, like you said, absolutely crushing it in the, what's going to be looked at as the, the later part of his career.
Right. Exactly. He's a lot older now, and he is killing it. He's one of the hottest names right now, I would say. That even if people don't know his name, that they'd recognize him. They're like, oh, I remember that guy. Okay, let's see here.
Cool. Glad you pointed him out.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's another celebrity in this movie too, and that's Yeardley Smith. So I had to look her up because I was like, this lady has such a unique voice. Like, she's got to be in something else. That is the voice of Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So she actually, too, sadly, has disowned this movie as well. She said that it was like she was very embarrassed by her acting in this movie. I thought she was so annoying in this film, but in like the best way, though. Like she's just, she is hilarious. And I love the scene where she's like, her husband's like, I need to go outside. I need to help. And she's like, no, you're not going outside. And he's like, I have to. And she's like, no. And he's like, yes. And she's like, she just looks at him and then she's like, don't make me a widow on my wedding day. And he's just deadpan. He's just like, okay. And then like they move on. Oh yeah, the romance in this movie is hot and heavy. Yeah, it's pretty intense. No, I'm just totally kidding. There is no romance in this movie. It literally, like, Brett the hitchhiker, she looks at Emilio Estevich and she's just like, you're cute. And he's like, am I? How? Right. and I know he was hot stuff in the 80s, but there's no... Okay, the thing that's funny, and the reason I like this movie so much is because it's horrible, a horrible Stephen King adaptation. And since Stephen King did it himself, it just makes it even better.
Right.
Like, the writing is terrible. It's just... It's bad. Like, I would definitely... Yeah. But that makes it actually so much fun. And so I would definitely put this movie over several of the... Because there's some really bad Stephen King adaptations, specifically for TV. And this one definitely is in a higher tier for me.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this before as far as, like, disaster pieces. And I think this is absolutely one.
Oh, yeah. Like, it was meant to be something else. And then over time, this movie has a reputation of being a bad movie. And it's totally a cult classic, especially for the people that like bad movies and that people that like Stephen King. Like, we're just now starting to really get into the bad Stephen King movies, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let me look real quick and see. Oh, yeah. And so it's interesting because of this movie, actually, that Evil Dead became a franchise. So you remember, since Stephen King was actually, when they were trying to get people to watch Evil Dead, and Stephen King actually finally saw it, and then he said he really enjoyed it. So they used that actually as advertisement for people to watch the movie, and so it kind of blew up because of him saying that he liked it. They used that line all over the posters. And so he heard that they were trying to make the Evil Dead 2, which came out the year later. And because he was working with Dino De Laurentiis on several films, he actually was able to connect them together. So then they got funding to make Evil Dead 2. So because of Stephen King, Evil Dead 2 was made. Otherwise, they may not have been able to get the funding for it.
Right.
That is pretty amazing. I didn't know that.
That is super amazing. Well, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about that early horror community. There's a lot of... I don't know, man. I feel like, again, I'm kind of new here, but it just seems like there's a little bit more, unity in that community than maybe in other genres, or I don't know.
I think because at the time too, there was a lot of stigma against horror movies, because there was definitely a huge resurgence in the early '80s, late '70s for horror movies to really go mainstream. Because before that, you had grindhouse flicks, which that was kind of that was anything goes, like gratuitous nudity, lots of extreme gory scenes. I mean, all of it looked really fake, but it was just like you needed as much gore and nudity as possible. And then the late '70s, of course, you had Halloween came out. And then it's funny though, like John Carpenter and Sean Cunningham were good friends, and then Sean Cunningham, of course, would come in later and do Friday the 13th, which really cemented that the slasher genre was here to stay. And then, yeah, like you said, like George Romero and Stephen King worked together many, many times throughout the years. And it's, of course, seeing Sam Raimi come up with the Evil Dead series. Like besides Evil Dead, he didn't really do other stuff. But yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it was just like, they're almost like not independent filmmakers, but they're almost like...
But like it feels like that to me, though. It just feels like they were really...
Well, they're kind of like guerrilla filmmakers. They're just like...
Yes. Yeah.
And that, I think, is where the fun is, because everybody, to me, it seems like everybody on the films wanted to make these movies, and that was exciting, and then obviously now you got horror movies that come out a dime a dozen, because the horror genre is so big and it's here to stay. But the horror community itself is normally like, it's pretty inclusive, it's fun. It's like a lot of us know that we're here just to have fun and to explore all kinds of different things. So
right.
yeah.
I think inclusive is a good word for that, for sure.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. So the one thing about this movie too is somebody actually almost died while they were filming this movie. At the end when the ice cream truck is headed towards them, which is kind of funny. It's like such a elongated scene. They cut out another scene. The ice cream guy is actually in the truck, but he's dead in the truck, and so you just start to see the outline of him, and then they cut it out, and you can't see it. But when they shoot the rocket at it and it explodes, the actual stunt went wrong, and it flipped the truck off of the trajectory course, and it almost killed a cameraman. There was a guy that actually pulled a cameraman out of the way at the last second, but he almost got totally got nailed by the ice cream truck. So that was pretty crazy. There were several actual machines that malfunctioned on set, so there were people who were like, "Ooh, is this actually happening for real?" But I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, for example, a lawnmower actually that was totally malfunctioned and then like ended up hurting somebody because it just was like it went off track again and just started doing its own thing. So
wow, there you go.
Well, this one we got
possessed,
right? Maybe it was. Well, actually, so that brings in another thought. Like, if they really thought through the idea of like this is actually aliens that are trying to take over the world, that would have been actually a really interesting and intriguing reveal instead of a last minute thought. Because in the story, if I remember correctly, in the short story, there's not aliens. The machines just malfunction, and it's kind of a dread feeling of like life as we know it is over, and it's like a post-apocalyptic sort of feeling. And in the movie, though, they're just they throw in that UFO thing at the end. But I actually think if they expanded on that, that would have been really interesting. They could remake this movie and have it be like an actual really intense social commentary, and then like have it turn into just a nutso sci-fi movie, which I think would be pretty cool. Because, for example, Tommyknockers is a fantastic alien invasion movie. Our book, love that book.
Right? Yeah, I love the book too. So
that would be interesting if they actually had gone that direction, because he has written about aliens before. So, anyways, yeah. Do you got anything else that you want to drop into this movie?
Not really. I mean, we've talked so much just about Stephen King in general on this episode. I mean, I would love to see him take another stab at filmmaking, even if he could just, I don't know, I don't want to say swallow his pride, but just look at the work that he did on this and then just go have fun making a movie. Just be like, whatever it is, here you go. It's just a fun ride. I wish he would take another stab at it. Of course, it would be very different not being on cocaine and drinking anymore. So, but yeah, I would love to see what he could come up with.
Well, I know he's interested in directing another movie because of that, because he has a lot more experience under his belt, and of course he doesn't have he's sobered up, he's not using drugs anymore, and he's just older, and so a lot more experience. And I think also having that near-death experience that happened in, I can't remember what year it was, like 2003 or 4, where he almost died. And
yeah, when he got hit by that. He was walking on the side of his road.
Yeah, thankfully Roland was there to help him and to save him. Right. But it just, I think that just kind of, it really, his writing before and after that accident, I feel like there's definitely like a different feel to it. And I just think it would be really fascinating to see him do that. I don't know though if he could. It's funny, his products make so much money, whether they're good or bad, but he lost money on this movie. And so I don't know if somebody would want to chance it again, if that makes sense. So
yeah, I hear you.
We'll see, but let's see. I just want to look and see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about with this film. I will say I'm excited. There's a bunch of new movies and stuff coming out based off of his books. Looks like they're remaking the Salem's Lot, and then they're finally making Revival, which is going to be directed by Mike Flanagan. That's going to be awesome. And
wow.
Then it looks like they're potentially Edgar Wright might be remaking The Running Man, which would be freaking awesome if that happens.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
that's intriguing. Yeah.
And then also James Wan is interested in making Tommyknockers, which, like I said, love the book. And I don't think that book has seen justice yet on movie-wise or even TV or anything like that. So James Wan, though, who just seems to be unstoppable with making all kinds of different movies, started with the Saw series. Then he's done things just as Aquaman, Furious 7. Very strong horror director. So that would just be awesome to see him take a crack at the king. So,
well, that one has such a good sci-fi vibe, too.
It does. And they could really expand on it, too. Yeah, I think that's about it. Let's roll into final verdicts on this one. So, Josh, do you think that this movie knocked it out of the park when it first came out?
Well, Jeremy, I feel fairly safe and confident that I can say that this is an absolute F when it came out.
Yes.
I don't think it could have scored any worse. Definitely not any better. It was not what people were expecting or had been led to believe the product was going to be.
I 100% agree. They really marketed up that Stephen King is the director of this movie. He's on like half of the posters. And, I forgot to say, so the soundtrack to this movie is, of course, by AC/DC, and there's limited printings of it actually saying the soundtrack of Maximum Impact. They got Maximum Overdrive. They got to the point where AC/DC they re-released the soundtrack, but just as a new AC/DC album, because it pretty much is.
Album.
Yeah. It pretty much is. And so I think that's hilarious, though, that they're just like, nah, we need to just distance ourselves from this movie. So, yeah. No, I agree with you. It was totally an F. It was a stinker. It did not do good. Is it still relevant today?
See, we've come into this situation several times recently on the show where it's, as far as its cult classic status goes, I mean, I don't know, man. It's got to be right there in the C level, I would think. I mean, everybody knows it's bad, but that's why so many people love it now.
Right.
I really don't know. If I were to guess, I'd say somewhere around a C.
Yeah, it's not like when you think of Stephen King movies, you don't think of this one, but then when you think of bad Stephen King movies, this movie is definitely up there as like one of the more famous ones. Because you know how Silver Bullet kind of walks the line of, is it a bad movie, is it a good movie? That versus this movie is like 100%. Nobody watched this movie and they were like, wow, this movie is definitely a piece of art. And so like people love this movie because it's so bad. So yeah, I definitely say it's probably not relevant anymore, but it definitely has a cult following to it. So yeah, I honestly want to rate it higher, but I give it a D because I don't think that it's very relevant today. But I definitely So
see, that was actually my first thought when as soon as I had finished watching the movie and I put my ratings down, because sometimes it changes the more I sit and think about it, or even after we have our discussion, I'll kind of evolve mine a little bit, but. That was actually my first. I gave it a D+ initially, but
it's just it's kind of. I totally agree. It's kind of tough to rate that one because in the whole scheme of things, the average moviegoer has not heard of this movie. But then you get into the horror community and you have heard of this movie, and then you can get into cult horror movies, and like you've definitely heard of this movie. So yeah.
Well, that kind of brings us right into enjoyment. What do you give it?
Oh man, I gotta give it a B. It's just it's a fun movie. It's so bad. It's like it's laughable at how bad it is. Like especially like at the end when they're about to escape on the boat, and then this guy is like randomly like, oh, there's this chick hanging out of this car with her. I'm gonna go steal her wedding ring, and then like. He apparently he was deaf because the diesel trucks are not quiet, and that thing was
a beast.
It was like easily far away, and he just turns around and he's like, oh, they had to get that final kill in there, and it was
of course
so funny because it was not earned.
It felt like an afterthought kill, definitely like, oh, yep, we should probably put one in. Here we go.
Yeah. Oh, it's bad. I definitely feel like this movie kind of actually runs out of steam like 3/4 of the way through, and then they finally decide, hey, we should probably leave, and then again it gets moving again. But this movie doesn't feel like it has any direction, which to its credit though is kind of more fun that way because it's just random, and you're like, why are we following this like this kid as he's riding around? I guess we're just seeing a different. Oh, it turns out he's his dad, that was his dad that got killed there, but it doesn't really matter. Like nothing matters in this movie.
Right.
My favorite character, though, I think one of my favorite characters is just the waitress who just keeps flipping out. And she's like, "We made you, we made you,"
Right.
and she just like, you get the idea she's supposed to be having like a mental breakdown, but it's just so bad that you're just it's bad. There's so many dumb people in this movie. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Well,
that gives me. I am definitely with you. It was absolutely a B for me. It's got everything that I love about, well, a lot of the things I should say that I love about Stephen King. I mean, other than the fact that the character sucked on this, which is very not Stephen King.
I know.
It hit everything else. It had the killer rock and roll soundtrack. It's got baseball in it. It's got cars. It's got explosions. And I mean, it's so many explosions. Oh my gosh. The practical effects in this movie. Holy crap. I mean, you can definitely see where they spent the budget. I mean,
right?
Just the amount of destruction to all these vehicles, it's incredible. So I mean, it's worth watching for that, just to see how many cars get destroyed and explosions and everything. So it was absolutely a thrill ride in that regard. So it's a solid B for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny too that the Dixie Boy was apparently, the set was so well constructed that there were several truckers that actually tried to stop there, and they finally had to put up a sign saying that they were filming a movie and that like people weren't allowed on the property, which is hilarious. Oh, and too, in the main, I would say the main antagonist, the Green Goblin truck. Yeah. It was destroyed, and then somebody found it in a junkyard, and they actually rebuilt the entire thing. And so every now and then, like they'll bring it to different Stephen King conventions, and you can take pictures of it. It's just like it's a privately owned.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I was like, that's really cool because that's such a like iconic. You see that, and like it's in the trailer, it's in the picture, the posters, and you're like, oh, that's from Maximum Overdrive, and which is funny because the story, of course, that's not in there. The story is really short, and the story is actually really creepy. Like that's why you get the idea of like this would actually make a really cool movie, and then you get Maximum Overdrive. And so, yeah.
But yeah, that truck is absolutely its own character, and that's another quintessential 80s thing where, well, just movies and TV in general up until, I guess in the 90s is probably some of the last time you got that, but where cars were a huge part of a story or a plot, and not just as a vehicle itself, but just the character of that vehicle. I mean, this one obviously had that iconic, Marvel Green Goblin face on the front. I mean, but that's very, very indicative of the time, and it's awesome. It's absolutely amazing. Like that would have been a cool truck to have as a kid. Oh yeah, absolutely. I guess we're at the rating. Midnight Watch. I'll go for myself. It's not a midnight watch. There's definitely parts of this movie where it slows down and you're kind of just waiting for the next spectacle to happen. Because this movie doesn't have a story, really. It's more of just like a series of events that happen in this. Oh, totally. And they're fun, but the parts that connect each event to an event is very badly done. And you lose a lot of steam. And like the whole scene where they first introduce the newlyweds and they stop and then they get attacked. Like that scene's really fun and exciting. But it's just like, it's a series of sequences. And so I would say, no, it's not a midnight watch, but though there are parts in it that are really fun to watch. So for me, it depends on where it is. I might watch like 15, 20 minutes of the movie and then go to bed. Right. But so nope, not a midnight watch for me though. What about you, Josh? Well, it's funny because my reasoning that it is a midnight watch for me is actually exactly your reasoning, except for the positive part of it. I do love that it's just a collection of random events, and almost every event is watchable to me. And I think also this movie did not let me down. And when I went into it, like, I'm really going to like this movie. And I did. I absolutely loved it. So I had the high bar set for this low bar movie, and
and it reached it.
And it reached it. Nice. It went to new depths, and new heights of lowness.
Right.
And none of that makes sense. Anyways, I really, really liked it, and just so many good parts that I would say this is a midnight watch for me in its disasterpiece theater-ness.
Oh yeah. I think this is probably, I might say this is probably maybe the worst movie that we've reviewed so far, like just in terms of, of just, it's a bad movie. But But is it enjoyable? Absolutely. But then again, it depends on why you're watching. Are you watching it because it's cheesy? Oh, 100%. It's super hokey.
Yes.
It's cheesy. Yes. No, I definitely recommend this movie. It's so much fun. Especially like if you just want to kick back and laugh at just absurdity, like definitely watch this movie. It's a classic 80s
and
cult movie.
another good watch party movie. It's another great one to put on with a bunch of friends and have some drinks and some snacks and just have a really fun time with this movie.
Yes, absolutely. No, I totally agree. Where'd you watch this movie?
Where did I watch it? I believe I got it on iTunes. Rented it on iTunes.
Nice. I rented it on.
No, I didn't. It was on Prime. We both watched it on Prime. I think it was free.
Right. It was. Well, yeah, it was covered. If you have a.
We pay for Prime. So yes.
Yes. If you have a subscription,
pay extra for this movie.
That's right. We did not rent this movie technically, but yeah, we both have a subscription to Amazon Prime. And I watched that. I would buy this movie, dude. I definitely feel
I would too, man. This is one worth having in your collection. Yeah, if you come across this in like the $5 bin at Walmart or something like that, or a garage sale, absolutely snap this one up. If you could find this on VHS, that would be awesome
that would be freaking dope for real. Yeah.
Of course, it'd be great if you had a VHS player.
Working VHS player. Well, it's funny. I was actually researching some different VHS tapes because just for collectors, just to be fun to get. Like for example, I was wanted to get a copy maybe of Dead Alive on VHS. Dude, those prices are going up. So
well, it's become a collector's thing. It's like how NES, Nintendo's. Where, I mean, you could buy an NES and like 10 years ago, or actually it's probably, man, we're getting old, dude.
Longer than that.
Probably 15 years ago, you could buy on eBay an NES and like a box full of games for like $30. And now it's like just the NES by itself is, $150. And then the games are, just depending on the game, going up all over the place. So VHS is definitely going that direction too. The nostalgia of it is incredible. I remember spending so much time getting rid of VHS 15 years ago.
Right, the Great Purge.
Trying to get, everything on a DVD and then everything on the Blu-ray. And it's ridiculous. And now some of those, like you said, you wish you had them. I mean, we just alphabetized our entire Blu-ray and DVD collection, and Trinity and I were both like, didn't we have this movie on something? And then a lot of them we realized were on VHS and we had never gotten them on a newer format, but
no, it's definitely you're right, it's definitely collectors. Because
don't throw anything away. There's a reason hoarders are what they are.
Hoarders have it going on. You're right. Yeah, minimalists are the enemy. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
That wraps up today's episode. Special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colvin. If you guys had as much fun as we did on this episode, we would love it if you shared it with your family, friends, and anyone that you think that would like it.
Yes, please subscribe, rate, review our podcast. They can be found on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, just about every other platform. Also, we'd love it if you would visit our Instagram or Facebook pages. We're also on Twitter. There's not much going on there, but yes, we are on Twitter. And we'd love to have you join our conversation on #WhatIsYourMidnightWatch. And you can reach us directly at the Midnight Watch Podcast at gmail.com.
That's right. Thank you guys so much for listening. You have a fantastic week. And as always, keep up the watch.